Chapter 2. Texts. Man as a mute? In the old pantomime, man was deaf and dumb. His acting consisted of a ridiculous, bombastic, and excited whipping about with all manner of gestures, a convulsive attempt to make clear, through the exclusive agency of gesticulation, a number of things, indeed everything, that cannot be said through gestures alone. Pantomime is tin horn and big drum solo. This is not the way of the moving picture, for it followed as a matter of self-evident fact that the inaudible words could be inserted in writing between the pictures. Many people, however, have succumbed to the delusion that the moving picture actor has regained his speech, and that without limit. There is no phrase of the film in which it is still groping about more in the dark, none in which its essential conditions have been so little fulfilled as in the matter of interpolated texts. One begins to have a feeling that the shorter the speech, the better, but even a battle of words consisting of short, even abbreviated lines can have an undesirable effect so far as the artistic impression is concerned. Laws are always first felt and then recognized in error. It is even so with the texts that accompany the pictures of the film. They are conditioned by a state of concealed necessity which the artist is in duty bound to recognize if he would impart to his text the psychic impressiveness without which it is a failure, and the artistic importance without which it cannot survive. The contrasts between the picture and the text exist. They even stand out. But they have never prevented plastic art from attaching written explanations to the works that sail under its banner, that is to say, the creations of the artist are named. If such a designation or naming were not employed, it is within reason to believe that many a work of art would never enjoy a correct or adequate interpretation. It will probably always be a mystery as to precisely what Titan meant by his inadequately designated celestial and earthly love. These terms or names are superfluous if not annoying, only when they convey an idea which is perfectly patent in the very nature of the work itself. Why ascribe set titles to such works as Traumerei, or The Water Carrier, or A Happy Home? Truth to tell, the interweaving of picture and text has been elevated to the rank of a unique art form by a great artist long before the moving picture began its ascendant course. I mean Wilhelm Busch, with his pictures and verses. In our soul, Busch's contrasts are dissolved and intertwined. They constitute an organic unity. They are a spiritual entity. Aesthetic categorizing has consequently been secured in turn, and that to the salvation of art. The discovery of the practical, artistic relations that picture and text should bear to each other have, unfortunately, not been made essentially easier thereby. There can be no doubt but that different peoples feel quite differently on this point. The Italian Gabriele D'Annunzio, for example, in his Cambiria, inserts sentences of a length, effusiveness, and fustian which are just as intolerable to the art sense of a German as are the swollen and pathetic stage notes of his regular dramas. Are we to conclude from this that we Germans are cooler, calmer, soberer, and less buoyant than the children of sunny Italy? Or are we to conclude that our feelings are safer guides in matters of art than those of the Italians because we believe that the true significance of the moving picture is to be sought in the picture and not in the text? For it seems to us like an artistic contradiction, like utter nonsense, when the film, intended to create its effect through moving bodies, supererogates onto itself art forms for which better means have been provided, more appropriate ways found. The book was made for poetry, and if it is to be spoken, its place is manifestly on the stage. The task of the motion picture, let us repeat, is to express feelings by gestures. In this proposition there lies hidden a great deal of knowledge. Feeling does not belong to the text. The written text is not its sphere. It is not to be spoken. It is to be given, form and substance through the art of mimicry. But there are motion pictures staged by men who, at the very thought of an "I love you," the warmest and tenderest possibility of this art, cannot resist the temptation to have these three words roared forth through so much accompanying text. But never mind, "I love you." That would be an almost classically sober wording. The actors could play this concept so perfectly that such a sentence, however superfluous it might be, would scarcely be noticed. The more, however, the text endeavors to create atmosphere through itself alone, the more the film departs from real art. In a certain gloriously dilettantish screen creation one reads, "Vera, you are so lovely and good to everybody. Couldn't you be lovely and good to me too?" Even a sentence such as, "You are beautiful," brought a discordant note into the general situation. We should be able to detect, in each of our five senses, the way in which the beauty of a woman gains utter control over a man. If we are so bereft of feeling and fancy that we cannot see this and feel it, a whole volume of emotional text would not be able to drum it into our heads and hearts. One notices that the film authors frequently try to bring a bit of poetry into their texts. "It is not wise to show me how much I lost when I erased the memory of the woman from my mind," said the tiger Ishnapur in the Indishis Grambal, Indian monument. In a case of this kind, words take to their heels, so to speak, wander out of the realm of undisciplined poetry, and lose all feeling for and connection with mimic action. But in the motion picture, the word is not free. It is bound with secret chains to the mimic action. If these are broken, the ensuing contradiction jars our senses, in that two art forms are welded together which in reality have nothing to do with each other. The striving after lyric tenderness and beauty is noticeable in a great many German and American films. In this regard, the Swede is wiser, his feelings more commendable, his texts are more objective and material, and the effects they produce are more wholesome and artistic. For wherever and whenever the text displays an excess of fire and fancy, the spectator remains as cold as ice. His feelings can be aroused only by the gestures, by the movements of the bodies of the actors. In Dr. Mabuse, we were regaled with this bit of declamation. He. Who is he? No one knows him. He stands over the city. He is as tall as a tower. He is damnation. He is salvation. And he loved me. The public was not moved one iota, but it laughed tears. Instead of being exalted, it was disenchanted, it was sobered down, for the very simple reason that the laws of the motion picture text are different from and narrower than those that have to do with poetry. The film texts that are written in verse prove to be pretty thin and anemic in their effect, even when a serious and gentle poet writes them. We have but to think of Der Müde Tod, Weary Death. They are, however, altogether unbearable when they come trotting across the screen in cumbersome armor of the iambic pentameter, as the Italians so frequently employ them. What kind of inflated film text has been rejected by the entire world? The film text cannot endure a revel in words. It must fit the action as tightly and neatly as a smooth, stiff fleshing fits an actor of the spoken stage. Dress it up with the festival garments of formal poetry, and these garments flop about its limbs while aesthetics go begging. Here is a thought to be kept in our memorandum. All that is said in the way of feelings in the text is not felt in the play. Our instinctive presentiment at this stage of film development is so deep that we are not going to admit through the threefold door of the heart any text that attempts to bend and mold this presentiment to suit its own purposes. The ease with which the spectator may be inundated with a flood of textual words cajoles some into smuggling the Ptolemy gold of speech into the moving picture. I forbid you to leave this house, and if you dare to act contrary to my wish in this matter, you will not receive a single penny from me. This text occurs in the Indisches Grambel. Fewer words would be more, that is, more effective. A clear, soulful portrayal, as well as a fixed, secure, and successful mounting, is made altogether impossible by such an unchastened and miserably affected text as this. The very dignity of the film in this case has been abandoned to the caprice of the man who wrote the lines. The author is in a position to do one of two things. He may either cleanse the film to the point of high art by grasping the true significance of such text as it is needed, or he may demote the same film with all its art potentialities to the grade of a mere hawked pamphlet by filling his text with the heavy, plebeian splashings of everyday and everyman conversation. But never mind. Such texts may be regarded as a failure, but they are by no means equivalent to the transferal of the material to the purely spiritual world, which is closed to the sensuous moving picture because it cannot be disclosed through gestures alone. But wherever we sense an attempt on the part of the text to make even a remote effort at touching on the problems of the intellect or spirit, we notice at once the patchouli stench of botched and bungled art. All these expressions of a well-meant and, in poetry, quite permissible brooding and grieving over the sinister incidents of life, as well as the threadbare philosophizing as goes with this species of mental indulgence, all of these utterances taste like thin lemonade, sweet, flat, and insipid. In them there is not a grain of real film feeling. The art of the great picture they know not. Exalted spirit, how near I feel myself to thee. That is, when it makes short shift with its fundamental right and privilege, if indeed it does not dispense with it entirely. The film of the film author is not shown by allowing his Pegasus to roam uncurbed over boundless territories, emitting wise sayings as he stamps the ground of his seemingly privileged course. His spirit, the intellect that he may have, is revealed in its true light when he exercises an iron within his search after the right expression, and makes this expression just as short and just as rare as the exigencies of the occasion permit. As Alfred Kerr has laconically put it, the goal of your expression, the briefer. And when this law is laid down and adhered to, the really marvelous begins to take place. These condensed, sober, frigid words actually begin to ring and glow, the best text that has ever been given in any motion picture, and the one that lent the scene to which it belonged to the most veritable magic was found in Caligari. At the end of these dark and somber hours stood the one word, night. This lone monosyllable, which in the rise and swell of poetry might be passed over quite unnoticed, cast a spell over us in the firm like the glowing of greenish eyes from the dark. Such brevity is, of course, not always necessary, nor is it at all times possible, for it would frequently be impossible for the general public to understand it, but a clear, clean primeness, one that is just as alien to any imitation of everyday speech as it is to the striving after original poetic effect, should characterize the style of the text that accompanies the picture. How could we best define a really adequate motion picture text? By saying that it is a lump of ice in which there is a glowing coal. Night. This is obviously the artistic sense of the style we are considering. We are endeavoring to make it possible for the actor to indulge in an unhampered and unhindered mimicry that is poles removed from the gymnastics of the pantomime. Carl Hupman said once upon a time, "That will always be a poor motion picture in which a violent effort is made through the overworking of gestures to express an idea which in reality can be expressed only through the medium of words." That, too, will always be regarded as a benevolent interpictorial text, which holds up to the mind of the spectator, suddenly and without warning, certain necessary words, the mission of which will be to impart roundness, fullness, and ultimate clarity to the mental content of the pictures that have been passing before our vision. The compass of the motion picture were far too limited to merit serious and universal studies if the materials that are used by it were confined to such as can be fully and adequately interpreted through gestures alone, and without the use of even the briefest explanatory text. The American, who troubles himself but little about theoretical considerations, frequently mounts, in less important films, individual scenes with 6 or more bits of text arranged in remark and reply. There has been a tendency of late, however, to exercise greater moderation in this respect. The whole matter can be summed up by saying that with regard to the number of interspersed words, and the length of the explanatory sentences that are used, one's feelings are the only safe criterion to follow, and they set down this as an infallible guide. A text is good if it is effective. It can be effective only when it harmonizes with the pictures. And if it is to be effective, that is, it is to find its way to the heart. The very narrowest of limitations are imposed upon it. The business of depicting feelings must be left to the actor. Any feature of the action that cannot be controlled in an unconstrained way by the art of mimicry must be cared for by the text. Under this heading would fall the announcement of decisions reached or resolutions made by the participating personages. But when the text essays to chew, swallow, and regurgitate what our imagination can dispose of by virtue of its own power, much better than words can tell, failure raises its austere visage. For imagination, if not left alone, slinks into the corner in disgruntled mood and proclaims from its safe but sinister seat that the entire performance is a fraud, and what seems like splendor is nothing but cheap paint. It is not the mute but the monosyllabic character that the motion picture develops. We are becoming aware of the fact that there is a pronounced tendency in this modern age toward greater brevity. We are turning away from the prolix and diffuse. We are endeavoring more and more to say a great deal in a few words, and to use expressions that carry comprehensive meaning. The man of the motion picture is related by affinity and by his very being to the man of the first quarter of the century. In the hands of a disciplined and experienced film writer, the text, as a tool of the trade, disports itself benevolently and is a handmaiden of the arts. In the hands of an inferior writer, it murders art and slays the canons of art, for the text becomes an end in itself, and its aesthetic lassitude, as well as its gradual effacement or rather extinction, robs in time the legitimate gestures of their specific meaning and their general significance. It is remarkable, however, that these facts, these bits of knowledge regarding the film, do not apply to the comic motion picture. Even the ingenious Chaplin, who makes more out of gestures than any of his colleagues, has never been known to object to a right good or juicy text. There are, in truth, quite a number of film comedies in which the foils and florets of wit are swung about with marked liberality and hilarity. But whatever may be said, whatever theories may be proposed, it remains a sober truth that the real freedom of the film artist is preserved, for his own enjoyment and that of his spectators, when he is allowed to make his picture effective as he sees it, and through such gestures as he personally sees fit to employ to his end. That is the thought the Swedes kept in mind in making of their astonishing film entitled Eroticon, in which they played fast and loose with all academic deductions touching on the muteness of the film, and if asked, when is text permissible, we would be obliged to reply that it is permissible only when it is necessary.